Well, I hope everybody's having a great day jumping in here on our general membership meeting. Should be a good one today. Good topics of discussion here. Pretty excited to see where this goes. Um, we'll give everybody just a minute just to join in here before we get started, before I give my spiel about MPMC. So, typically I start off with some bad dad jokes, but I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings by skipping those, I hope. So I can kind of jump in here. I'm just going to go ahead and give our agenda. Um, I'm John Lambert. I'm the chair of MPMC. Also general manager at Speed Tech Performance, which we're a QA1 company. We're going to jump in and we're going to talk about product marketing, data that moves parts. We've got a good panel of discussion here with Gigi Ho from SEMA Data and Mike Kibbe from Motor State Distributing. Brian LeBaron is our incoming chair for MPMC from Fluid Damper. And we've got James Odell from Northwood University, excuse me, and Joseph Pita from SEMA Data. I do want to go ahead and have you guys, we've got a poll that should be popping up for you. Basically just going to get some basic information from you about you and your company, and maybe some interest in future webinars that you could fill out for us. That'd be great. Just good feedback for us. I'll give you just a second to fill that out. Should be just a few questions. All right, I think we can roll to the next slide here. Keep the ball rolling. Do want to give a shout out to our council leadership. These are all the volunteers that really kind of push things along in the background. These are all volunteers. I'm your chair, John Lambert. Incoming chair is Brian Bolander. He's from Old World Industries. On our select committee, we have Mark Campbell from Deechworks, Nolan Jamori from Eski Cams. Brian LeBaron is our incoming chair-elect from Fluid Damper. We got Ian Lind from Boustain, Johnny McDevitt from Blueprint Engines, Scott McLaughlin from Holly Group, Karen Orlandi from ProCharger, Adrian Peters from Race Tech, Mike Sanders from Edelbrock, and Bill Bader is our SEMA board liaison from Summit Motorsports Park. And last but definitely not least, our council director is Marcy Yanis. She's the one that herds all the cats. So give her many thanks. So upcoming events. We've got another webinar coming up in September on the 18th. That'll be discussing new media model, basically exploring the future of media. A lot of changes going on there. We just kind of want to discuss, what does everybody see and, how can we explore the future there. We also have our PRI Member Appreciation and Awards reception at the PRI show, which is in December on the 12th. That'll be at 5 p.m. That's on a Friday. Obviously, that's an Indy. Then the big thing for us is our media trade conference. We're going to do that in California again. So we did it in Orlando this year. We'll be back in California in January of 26 in Anaheim. So don't forget, if you want to be a part of that, registration should start opening up here pretty quick. So look for that. If you've never been, you're missing out. You got to be there. Membership report on the MPMC Council. Current member companies are 169. We do have a few new members here we want to say hello to. Heed Performance Manufacturing, ModelWorks Inc., Neonic, and SoCal Billet Inc. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to a good future with you guys. And if you're already a member or if you're just joining, please update your contact information. Make sure we've got everybody that you want to be looped in to MPMC, the goings on, and the invitations to webinars like this. All your employees can be MPMC members and can be included in communication. So just email member@sema.org to request your additions to our roster. If you need help, don't hesitate to reach out. Contact Marcy at SEMA.org. She can definitely help you out if you have any questions. So we just want to make sure we're keeping in touch with everybody. You know, Communications, the MPMC Council, we have several ways that you can communicate with us, or you may see information from us come out. We have member spotlights and videos. You can share stuff with us and we can push it out through our channels. Same thing, we have MPMC member updates. We do have SEMA e-news articles, and we also have social media, Facebook and LinkedIn accounts that we invite you to link and follow to. All right. We're going to have another poll pop up here. Want to get a little bit more information from you, specifically about the topic at hand. So you'll see that pop up here if it hasn't already. There's about 5 questions in there just related, to basically you and the topic at hand. So today we're going to discuss product marketing, data that moves parts. I'll be your moderator, like I said. The guests that we're going to have on the panel to discuss this are going to be Gigi Ho from SEMA, Brian LeBaron from Fluid Damper, Mike Kibbe from Motor State Distributing, and James Odell from Northwood University. So we've got a great team here lined up. This is going to be a great discussion. So if you have questions, if you want to, chime in, if you have something you want to cover for sure, do use the webinar chat. That'll pop up and we can launch those questions in kind of as we go. Feel free to be interactive here. So I appreciate you guys in the past. If you've been on one of these and you've contributed, I really appreciate it. It makes the discussion go really fluid. So we're going to jump into this thing and get the ball rolling. So I'll give you a second just to finish up that poll and we'll get it started. So, got a good team here stacked up. I think, probably, either Joe or Gigi, if you want to jump in and kind of give us maybe a discussion about where SEMA fits in for SEMA data and how that really makes a play for, what does that mean for a company on both ends of the spectrum, whether you're a manufacturer of parts or you're a reseller of parts. What are you guys seeing that SEMA is really stepping into, how you're helping those companies?
Well, thank you, John. I'll be happy to fill in. Well, I mean, SEMA data has certainly gone through an evolution over the last 6 years. And, we started off as really just trying to provide standardized product content for our retailers, resellers in the industry. And when I say resellers, I mean, everything from a warehouse distributor down to a mom and pop, shop or retail store. And what we've come to realize is, yes, the standardized data is important and actually helps manufacturers really guide them into providing the product information that is going to be useful at every one of those different levels of a reseller. But then on the reseller side, we also realize that there needed to be tools and help with how to take that data in. And we found that, depending on the resellers himself or themselves, they can take in a standardized XML, which is actually what ACE and PI standards are. They're delivery standards. They're not really the content standards themselves. But then we realized, not everyone can take XML. Not everyone can spell XML. I know it's kind of funny. But so we've modified that to enable tools for any reseller to take product information, whether it's a flat file or, custom feeds, APIs, every method that's possible to take in the product information to help them sell. All that, though, is on the backbone of the manufacturer's product content. So, and as we all know, COVID hit us in 2020, and I would say that there was definitely a sentiment that auto parts would never be able to be sold online exclusively. Well, 2020 kind of changed that for all of us. And as we build our product information out moving forward, we really kind of have to have an eye on e-commerce or how that product looks online. And so that's where we started. We started at, pure standardized data, XML delivery, maybe flat file delivery, to now today every way that you can deliver product content, and our scorecards kind of help guide the manufacturers to create product content that's e-com friendly.
Yeah, that's a good point there. The scorecards of kind of helping give feedback back to the manufacturers that are supplying the data, kind of, are you getting a scorecard? Are you basing that on your experience of what data works well, or are you using that from feedback from the people that are getting the data from SEMA?
A little bit of both. I would say that with the bronze and silver level scores, they're really to help the manufacturers set up the item at their customer. So bronze is kind of very introductory type information, and usually the life cycle status there might be, coming or announced or something like that, just
Yeah,
to let the reseller know that this is something that is going to be filled in further. But if it's packaging information, if it's part number, pricing, etc., just the minimum information available. And then
gotcha.
as you move forward up the line, it's really a matter of talking to the different resellers that we've had and what's important to them.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of skipped over this here, and maybe just a little bit of clarification for, somebody that's not, as experienced with the ACEs and PIs data. Can you give me a little bit of information, like what are the core segments of like the PIs data versus the ACEs data, and like what's what?
Sure. So if you want to kind of shortcut it, think of pies that starts with a P, which is for products, right? So pies is all related to the product content. And then A is for applications or fitment, if we can think about it that way. And it's all related to the vehicle or vehicles that the parts fit.
Yeah,
Um, and like I mentioned earlier, the standards themselves are really a delivery standard, and the delivery standard is XML. Um, within the ACES and PIEs, there are fields of information. It's how the information is rolled together and delivered. But the information itself can be usable, whether it's a CSV or, Excel file or API
yeah.
call. Mhm.
So we don't have to have a programmer on site here to get our data in to where we can share it to the world.
Yeah, the great thing about the SEMA data program is, let me introduce you to Joe Sapita too. So Joe is our director of eCatalog, and he runs our data team. So our data team works with manufacturers directly and also kind of culls over the information that goes into our database of products. And what we do there is we have tools like Parts Hub that helps manufacturers to catalog the information. Really, the point of our program is if you know your products, provide us the information, and through the process, you will create standardized product content. You don't,
Right.
Joe loves to teach all of our members about the standards and its requirements. That really helps with, creating the content itself. But in terms of like in-depth technical knowledge, really, you just need to know your part and what your parts fit.
Yeah, yeah, that's super helpful, on knowing we worked, pretty hand in hand there several times at my previous career in hypertech. We got into the nuts and bolts of how to pull this stuff through, and I would say that 50% of the time it was we were overcomplicating things because we had engineers doing the data there. So, it really, I see the benefit there of SEMA taking data from somebody that may not be new to it, and making it easy to transfer it over into these standards that can get out to, guys like Mike here that, are going to take that data and put it onto, not only their website, but, also share it to their customers as well. So that's, super powerful, kind of bridging that gap of, you don't need an engineer on staff to try to get this data here. I can tell you firsthand that sometimes that complicates things. So, we can't help it, engineers are, we're a quirky group, so.
Well, I actually love engineers because, in when you look at product content, especially when you look at product attributes, um, it's the engineers and the product managers that really have
Yeah.
designed that product. So when it comes to specificity,
Yeah,
um, I love engineers. We need
right.
them. I want
Detail,
the details. We need the details.
right?
And really that builds the confidence with the end consumer who's
Right.
purchasing your parts. They want to see what's important to them. And you really can't guess what's important to them. So sometimes you just need to provide the specs.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, is having
Mhm.
more details about your products makes it easier to, find that bit of information that, can sell that product. So, Mike, I know we talked about some of the uses of the SEMA data here, the ACEs and PIs information in our pre-discussions. I would like to take a little bit of time here and say, like, give Mike, I'd like to get your input of, like, as a distribution channel, how are you using this data, and what are you looking for from the manufacturers to provide that, you know what's our end goal as a manufacturer? What's our end goal for you that works best?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to tell Gigi that the introduction of the flat file export has dramatically increased usage because it's far easier to understand. XML, when opened into Microsoft Excel or any spreadsheet program, can be quite difficult to understand. So
Right.
that's been a fantastic simplification for people to understand that aren't engineers or aren't used to consuming the data. So, from Motor State's perspective, we have historically used Pies and Aces data to help support our internal content data team. That is about to change dramatically, where we will be consuming Pies and Aces data, uh, specifically Pies initially, and then we'll layer Aces in for the brands that have it that we sell. So that's something that's new to us because of the size of our organization and the amount of time we've been around. A lot of our systems, the Pies data when it early was coming out, didn't we couldn't consume it easily, and it required large changes. So we've been working on that for a significant amount of time. We're about ready to pull the trigger on that. So we have already started importing it, and we'll start to see it in like our e-commerce software that's called Price Guide Pro. So my experience with Pies primarily has been helping jobbers, small and large jobbers, our wholesale distributors, get or introduced to the Pies and Aces data and then onboarding it through their team. So from my perspective, and again, I don't mean to be critical, and this is not a criticism of any one manufacturer, because believe me, I get how hard it is to keep up with all this stuff. But I would say from my perspective in dealing with the jobbers for the last 20 years, there's two main areas that I think as a consumer of the data that there's pain points or rough edges that I think manufacturers could be aware of. The first one is the onboarding process. And if you go through an organization like SEMA, obviously SEMA is doing a lot of the work, but they don't own the data. So there needs to be permission to distribute that data. Those requests, SEMA's made it very easy now to do in bulk. So depending on what catalog of information you're interested in, you can ask for multiple brands all at once. The challenge comes in is that those responses come in at variable rates, right? Some manufacturers obviously have great checks and balances and resources allocated where things are coming through very quickly. And other times we hear that sometimes they aren't getting any response at all. And from my perspective, sometimes I think that's a negative response that they're just not giving. And I would encourage you, if you do want to say no, just say no. Like, people are a lot easier. It's a lot easier to deal with than a no answer. So that's something that I think could be aware of. That's discouraging for people as they're excited to get involved in this, and then they meet this barrier of they don't even know how to get permission. And then the second thing, which again is a very challenging problem, is the cadence of maintenance, right? As rolling changes occur, and even things like packaging changes, which we saw dramatically through COVID. Gigi brought COVID up. We had, just as an example, we had brands that had 3 different versions of packaging for the exact same part number in our warehouse at the same time during COVID, because people couldn't buy corrugates and they couldn't get packaging and they were struggling. So that makes it very challenging to have accurate product data when things like that are happening. So again, the data itself, the people who are producing it, it seems to be pretty good. Those are the two main pain points that I've seen over the years.
Yeah, no, that's great information, man. And you know, when you're talking about all this data, I guess, you know, the path through this is you make a widget that you want to sell, your company wants to sell. It's how do you share that information about that to get it to the end consumer through paths that, you know, vary, you know, whether you're selling it, you know, online, whether you're selling it to, you know, just local shops or, you know, whatever. If there's a way that you can see that information, you know, that you can imagine how many different websites there are that sell parts. They're all shaped a little bit different and function a little bit different. You kind of see this standard for aces and pies as a way to get a standard, you know, quote unquote flat file that, hey, the information's there. Here's what the widget is, here's what it does, and here's what it, you know, what vehicles it fits. That lets, you know, guys like Mike take that information and incorporate it into their side where they can share that to their, you know, to their customers. So, you know, that's the pass through here is, you know, aces and pies is kind of that standard way of doing things is, hey, if you give us this information this way, we can share it out and we can get it to the people and, you know, get it incorporated in a way that is easiest. It's the easiest answer we have to standardize it. So, you know, what Mike's talking about is the upkeep side is, hey, you don't just want to throw the information out there to every Tom, Dick, and Harry because that can get abused just like anything. So you have to be, you know, diligent about, hey, there's a request for your information. SEMA doesn't just give it out. They have to, you know, they ask you as the manufacturer, hey, would you like to share this information with these companies and these potential customers? You know, if there's somebody on there that you've had a bad experience with in the past, you can say no, or for whatever reason, hey, I just limit it to these customers. You know, that's all. You have that choice, and that's pretty powerful. You know, that SEMA kind of plays that liaison to, you know, let everybody know how we're playing together. But it is important, as Mike explained, to keep that information fresh and to keep it accurate, but also to keep responsive that when requests, which, you know, can be pretty regular, you know, and also the other thing is, hey, you know, sometimes errors happen. You know, you type a T instead of a G. You know, hey, that's something that throws it off. That's throwing off the data where I can't get to your, you know, your PDF or whatever information you've provided. We found an error that gets fed back through. You know, that's something you have to address and you want to address because that makes, you know, that's pertinent to your product selling. So, you know, there's where the responsibility lies is, hey, you can't just, you know, one and done here. There is work that you have to do, you know, on the back end to make sure that it's worth your time and worth everybody else's time. So, Brian, you know, I know you've been involved with Aces and Pies through your company too. So, you know, do you have any input here that you've seen that, you know, makes a big difference for you?
Sure, sure. A little bit of a background here, because I'm right in the thick of it. Fluid Damper is one division of a much bigger company. So we have a shared marketing department over 4 divisions, and there's only 3 of us. So the impact of aces and pies compared to the scheduling availability that we have, it's always a balance. I can share that if you're a manufacturer, no matter if you have as a handful of SKUs or a full 30,000 plus SKUs, it's dedicating a person to it. Be a point person, but knowing that that point person is going to be working with your engineering department and with the shipping department and building those internal coalitions to make sure that data is accurate and up to date. And if you can nail that, it makes the process a lot easier for folks like Mike. I will say that, you know, as manufacturers are pressed for resources, I've leaned on Joe plenty of times in the past to get us up to a gold standard and maintain that standard. So use the tools out in the industry.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Is like you're looking at how to work with the engineer side, the data side, and how that information, how you can share that out to boost the sales, you know, team. You know, how do you boost the sales channel? You know, whether it's your internal sales team or your external sales team. And so how do you share that information? That's the benefit of the aces and pies, is it standardizes how to get it there. And, especially with teams, when you have teammates like Joe and Gigi here that can help you along and have standards that say, hey, you just need a little bit of information and a little bit more attention here. And that kind of gets you up to the, either silver or bronze or gold standard that, hey, that's one step in the right direction, that your information is going out to people correctly, so, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that's what you're trying to do, is kind of mesh everybody together as, teammates to try to sell this product that we've gone and developed and brought to the market. So, um, James, I do want to kind of fold you in here. I think you've got some interesting input here, and probably some insight of how people can get into this a little bit even more detailed.
Well, I came from distribution for 22 years, and now I get to teach at Northwood University. And we work with organizations in the aftermarket to help train them on aces and pies. We work with Gigi and Joe. In fact, I've been privileged to have them on campus in my classes on the undergrad side, doing exercises with our undergrad students on aces and pies, getting them ready for the industry. And it is so fun to work with our students because they are eager on e-commerce, and they love selling things through the internet and the marketing side. But then when you show them, hey, this is the language that the aftermarket speaks for parts cataloging. And if you don't speak this language, you can't communicate with your channel partners. And we show them the results of this. Hey, go to Amazon and look at a part or something that you want to buy. And if there's no data there, there's no content there, there's no photos there, the data that they do put is conflicting, or it overlaps, or it's confusing. Would you buy that part? And the answer is resoundingly no. And that's true in the aftermarket as well. When you manufacture a part and you put it out to the industry, but you don't have photos, you don't have content, you have conflicting data, your marketing copy conflicts with your engineering copy, the person that goes to look for your part to potentially buy it is not going to buy it. But when you have nice, clean data with good pictures, good descriptions that are clear on what it fits and how it works and what the product attributes are, Mike's going to sell a ton of those things, just a ton. And if we don't have those things, Mike's not going to sell many of them because his customers aren't going to know what it is. They're going to get scared off on it. So training on this is,
and we're
so
going to get
important.
returns.
And you get returns. And we see this with our industry partners. We see examples where they put a part out and they don't have all the data and they don't sell any. And they say, well, why are we not selling this? And then they put the data in, they get it standardized into the aces and pies format, which is essentially just a language. They're learning how to speak the language of e-commerce. And when they learn how to present their data through the language of e-commerce, their sales go up, their returns go down. Again, our channel partners that do this through places on the web talk to us about the returns they get and why they're getting returns. And it comes back to the catalog data, the ACES data, what does the part fits? And when it's confusing, people are buying the wrong part. And so they naturally send it back. So training is so important. Just imagine that you went to a foreign country that you didn't know the language, and you're trying to talk to people with hand gestures. How inefficient would that be trying to communicate? You could communicate, but it's less efficient than if everyone spoke the same language. Aces and pies is that language that allows us to communicate efficiently with one another. So when you're thinking about what is the resource allocation I would need to hire someone to do this job, it is a commitment and it's an investment. But what are you giving up by not investing in that and not selling those parts and getting those returned? You're spending that money. You're just spending it in other areas. And I would argue that learning to speak the aces and pies language, investing in folks there and the skills there is going to drive your strategy, is going to drive your top line sales, is going to reduce returns, and it's really going to drive efficiency in your organization. And you will find that the investment is well worth it. The beauty of this in our industry is you have resources to to lean on. You have Gigi, you have Joe, you have other resources in the industry that can help you learn that language, or take your information and translate it into the language of aces and pies so that you can scale your business. If you're trying to communicate to 50 different channel partners in 50 different ways, you can't scale that. But if you can leverage the resources you have through SEMA data and other partners to get standardized, you can scale your operation. It's efficiency, it's top line, it's less returns, so many benefits just to be able to speak in that language.
Yeah, man, that's a great point, man. That's spot on. You know, that's what you need is a standardized language, and that's where aces and pies really makes it easy. Um, Speaking of, you talked about, kind of made that analogy of foreign language here. One of the questions is asking about, are there JDM vehicles, is that integrated in aces and pies and that kind of stuff? I guess, kind of to zoom out a little bit is what are the restrictions, or are there any restrictions as far as what data can be and what vehicles can be covered with aces and pies? Are we just automotive, or can you get into other vehicles, power sports, non-domestic market vehicles and things like that? Where do you get information like that you could, disseminate your coverage for your vehicle? Is that something that SEMA can help make that happen?
Yeah, so with regards to SEMA data, we actually subscribe to a vehicle configuration database. You'll sometimes hear the initials VCDB, and that is managed by our sister association, AutoCare. Within the VCDB, granted, the vehicles in it are North America. They're trying to expand. We have South American vehicles in there as well. It's a different table. The tables that currently are with SEMA data, not to say that we couldn't license or subscribe to those other tables, it's just that we haven't had the need or request to do so. But within the VCDB, you have everything from, cars, vans, motorcycles, UTVs, ATVs, even some RVs, and agriculture, so you have like lawnmowers and two-stroke motors, things like that. So I would encourage, for you to reach out. I probably have a list of vehicle types that are in the VCDB somewhere. It's probably about, I think, like 12, 15 types. Joe, do you know for sure?
Not off the top of my head. I'm trying to get in there now to look at them all.
It's a pretty broad swath. Snowmobiles, submarine. I mean, there's a lot in there. In speaking directly about the JDM vehicles or the gray market vehicles, the VCDB does not plan on having gray market vehicles managed within the database. It is something that SEMA data is looking at managing or creating tables for in itself. It's a little tricky because one is the approach we can have is that every vehicle that's created that is, I'll call it user-based or user-generated based vehicles could be held specifically to that manufacturer, or we could feed it into a larger database and then, similar to having a committee or some kind, really have it like a wiki version to where the broad audience of our manufacturers can help to, clarify, clean up, correct any of the vehicles that get added that are gray market.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Is now you're talking about SEMA not only subscribing to a very large database to get that kind of standardized for the most popular vehicles, but also managing even more niche vehicles that, SEMA's not ignoring the smaller companies and smaller niche markets here. That's really powerful. So I don't know, that that's the general consensus out there that, that's just something that SEMA is looking at doing. That's really, really exciting. So basically, if you have, you know, or request or need to that, that's something you can reach out to SEMA and talk to the data side and ask, you know, how can I get my information, you know, shared, you know, so that's a good path, you know, so, you know, along those lines, you know, if you are, you know, if we're talking about an MPMC member company, like who can our MPMC members basically partner with? How do they create this information? How do they get started, I guess, is the best question there is. How do they get started with sharing information across, you know, ACEs and PIs?
Well, it would be a matter of signing up with SEMA data. Although we are a industry program or a SEMA association program, it is a paid program. And where our pricing is based on the number of SKUs you have and the number of brands that you have.
Yeah.
It is, you know, we make a great effort to keep things as affordable as possible, but still honestly cover the costs. And as you can imagine, our database is, you know, hitting around 5 million parts, and I can't even tell you how many vehicle fitments are in there.
Right.
It's 20, it's in the, you know, many millions. And so, you know, the cost that we were charging really is to maintain those systems. And just so you know, we have over 4,000 resellers, and that again goes for everything from warehouse distributor to wholesale dealer to mom and pop shops. In the last year, we've sent out like over 2.5 million data sets. So it's, you know, these all come at a cost. We try to keep it affordable, but we do have to
Yeah.
pay for the electricity.
Right. You know, an interesting thing about that is you talk about 4,000 resellers that, you know, can request to have information about, you know, my company's products. The neat thing about that is when you think about, you know, I just know the history of ACEs and PIs data, you know, that I went through at Hybridtech is sharing that out. You know, we generated everything and did it for our own website, and then we tried to disseminate it out to, you know, guys like Mike to their websites. And, you know, what we would find is, you know, it became very cumbersome of trying to do that when you found an error is having a repository where all the information goes is once the information is corrected, everybody gets the updated, you know, correction. So, you know, when you talk about 4,000 different resellers, you know, that may sound like competition, you know, as a reseller, but the reality is that as long as everybody's got the right information out there, you're talking about a team that, you know, hey, I may have seen it on, you know, company X's website, but there's something else I'm shopping for over at Motor State. You know, I'll button it up here too, is, you know, do one order from there. So, you know, having that information the same and corrected across, you know, 4,000 different companies, that is really powerful and something that, you know, takes minimal effort, you know, to get corrected and to keep correct and to keep accurate. That's a really powerful, you know, that's you know, if you're starting today, you are skipping over a lot of hassle that happened in the, you know, the decade or so before. So, you know, that's don't be scared of this, I guess is what I'm getting at is don't be scared to jump in here and get involved with having ACEs and PIs data for your parts. You're essentially coming in at a great time here, and you got great partners that can help you get there quickly and guide you, you know, with ratings, you know, that helps you kind of set the bar to achievable goals. So that's super powerful, you know. So if you're, you know, looking to start that or looking for help, you know, SEMA's a great place to go ask for, you know, help. You know, I see if you're watching some of the comments here, you know, in the chat, you're seeing, you know, people thank, you know, Joe and Gigi for their help already, you know, that they've provided before. Also, you know, I'll tell you that Joe just threw up a list of all the vehicle types that they have access to at SEMA data. It's huge. I mean, scooters, you know, I may need to get into that, you know, that's got to be a good seller, you know.
Well,
Mike,
and
you think you
John,
could sell some stuff for scooters, you know?
We can sell it, sure.
All right, that's what I like to hear.
and John, consider as we have a very diverse population in the United States with different languages spoken, and even in North and South America, the various languages spoken, once you have your data in the ACEs and PIEs configuration, it's easily translated then or mapped to Spanish or mapped to French or mapped to other languages. And as we build out more and more translations, your data doesn't have to be reconfigured. So if you're selling to a Spanish language market, how are you going to reach them if every time you have to create a new database to send your data to a new customer or to a new language area? Whereas ACES and PIEs just scales that for you, and you flip a switch and it translates it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, man. That's I haven't even thought about that scale. You know, I don't have to learn a new language now. I feel a lot better. I
You
didn't do
just
very
flip
good
it.
at French.
You flip a switch and you can sell in Montreal and Quebec. You flip a switch and you can sell in the Southwest in Spanish, or Florida in Spanish, or sell in multiple languages in the same area.
Right.
I
Yeah,
know up
that's a
here
good
in
point.
Michigan, we have populations that vary in different languages, and you need to have somebody that speaks that language to sell those parts. I can't sell them because I'm not good at Arabic, and we have a large Arabic population in our area. But this allows that scale. So where do you start with ACEs and PIEs? You take a first step, whatever that step is. Get year, make, and model. Get fitment data in there. Just start with something. Start with Joe and Gigi. Hey, I have this data. How can I take this data and make it more? I'm not going to add more data, more content to it. This is what I have now. Let's just make this in the right format. And then what's my next step? And start leveraging those resources that are out there to help you build out so that you can scale your organization.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot of the times with manufacturers, we start with, what's your price sheet? You know, it's like the bare minimum. Just get your part number, your, general descriptions, what it fits, what it costs, and some of the packaging information, like the dimensions of it. And
Right.
we can get started. Really, it's a price list to start, and then we can guide you from there.
Yeah, and I would hope that any manufacturer has a price list, they have to know what they're selling for.
And I've seen Joe and Gigi in action in my classroom teaching my undergrad students, and they assigned them ACEs and PIEs assignments. And they said, this is what we're going to do. And they were knocking, not my students, Joe and Gigi, they're knocking that stuff out. They're so good at it that you can give them some basic information, and in a fairly short period of time, they can have your data formatted and you're off and running. You've taken the first step. Congratulations. You're on the ACEs and PIEs journey.
I think it's worth mentioning when you talk about barriers to entry for a new manufacturer. I think a lot of times people feel inadequate or inferior when they're talking about data. They're afraid of what they don't know. The SEMA data tools make it easy for you to get involved and kind of structure the process so that you don't have to know everything. It steers you in the right direction to make those decisions as you're going through it. So
Yeah.
it's easier than a lot of people think once you get going.
Right.
I would say
Yeah.
on the manufacturer side, talking about data, a big piece of that are the digital assets. If you're a manufacturer and invest in a photography studio or invest in a local photographer that can do it for you, and add video as well too, because when you shop in e-commerce, the visuals are such an important means of selling. It's well worth the investment into product photography.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have a funny story. This is going back quite a ways. I don't know if Nolan's on the call or not, but this is years ago. I was trying to get Nolan's catalog electronic. This is like a 50-year-old catalog. And they didn't have any pictures, or the pictures they had were still like on film. And so I asked him when his next inventory was. And at the inventory, I said, take every single part. When you're counting them, get it on the table and take a picture of it, and then put it back on the shelf. At least have something for a digital asset. Again, this was like 20 years ago. Technology has gone way farther today, but it can be as simple as that. As your products are coming off the line, as you're doing an inventory, if you don't have images, set a short process to be able to make that happen for you. And it's not that hard to capture.
One picture is better than no pictures.
That's right. Yeah, and that's just, you know, not everybody knows exactly what product you have or what makes it different or makes it better. So having a picture's worth 1,000 words. So, you know, at least, you know, if you're jumping into this new, to make it, you know, something that's manageable, if you have you know, if you're worried about the workload here, you can at least, you know, prioritize about, you know, what's your most popular product? What's the one you're most excited about? Probably something new, you know, pick a few, you know, and jump in there. You can have a price sheet and have just data on some parts and get going. It's okay to not jump in with everything, you know. Um, you know, so there's a lot of information here that goes a long ways. You know, like Gigi said, is you can jump in as simple as, hey, you know, what part numbers do you have? You know, what parts do you have and what do they cost? Providing that gets you started, and then working with SEMA to, you know, target more information about your parts that you want to share. You know, you can do this. You know, it's not undoable. It's not, you know, overly complicated. It's as complicated as you want it to be, but you know, you can get some guidance here and kind of target what you need to make it worth your while. So, you know, and that's going to pay off quickly, and you'll see, you know, your company, the benefits that you get. I mean, you know, how else can you touch 4,000 different resellers that would like to share your products and sell them? Like that is immensely powerful, you know, and making sure that, you know, your information is shared continuously and collectively correct across the internet. That's super powerful. That's a really good start. Like I say, it just amazes me having this conversation of how many people are here to help and have good insights here to get someone new to this started by jumping over a lot of hurdles just to get over the, you know, to get it started. You've accomplished so much that has been a burden in the past that, you know, like you say, 20 years ago, this would have been, you know, monumental task to get this done, you know, because the standards weren't there to make it easy to convert to different languages and to different resellers, you know, and that's a really big plus. So, you know, this is a great time to get started into aces and pies, and really all you have to do is simply reach out to, you know, SEMA and ask. You know, they can help you get started. So that's really cool. And, you know, obviously, you know, there are a lot of companies that already have aces and pies data. You know, if you're looking to take what you have, you know, if you have a big catalog, you can jump in and say, hey, you know, I've got kind of a mess on my hands. Where do I start? You know, that's easy too, you know, or how do I make my information better? You know, that any phase along the way, that's something that SEMA can help with. And that's, you know, that's a great asset to have. And that's something you shouldn't ignore for your company because of the benefits are so, you know, so great to that. So, you know, we're getting about 10 minutes till here. I've seen a few questions come through, you know, come through the chat here. Joe, I see you made a good point here, is like even using a picture from your iPhone to get a picture of a product. You know, we just talked about that. You know, everybody's got a phone in their pocket pretty much now. You know, I know a couple people with flip phones that don't have cameras, but you know, let's leave them out of the discussion. But you know, a simple picture of your, you know, of your product is a good start. That's better than nothing. So, you know, that's a great point to make, is this is as simple as you can make it. It can be as complicated as you want. But I was wondering, is there anything, you know, anybody here on the panel, do you want to discuss anything that we haven't covered yet?
I will say, to Mike Kibbe's point earlier about sharing data or getting the information out, you know, if you have a separate group of audiences from when you're getting those resellers, you know, approved for data sets, you can have multiple data sets with SEMA data so that you can actually segment out who you want to send what. And when those requests come in for your product information, you can, in that approval, you pick which data set you want to send them. So there's more
Absolutely.
controls to the manufacturer than, you know, than just like who you're sending it to. You can actually even narrow down to what you want to send them.
Right. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
pretty powerful too.
Mhm.
I would just like to,
Oh, yeah.
oh,
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, just to add in, as a manufacturer, as you're building out your aces and pies, think about scale. Start getting in habits and forming consistency. So you're gonna get a routine. It becomes more efficient the more you do it. We've been doing it now for about 10 years, and I'm still learning. And it's great to have the team at SEMA and at Northwood, because all those best practices help us scale more SKUs and get product out faster. And um, that's why I say, if as you get into it, just think long term and start building processes.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mike, you have anything else you'd like to add here?
Not at this point. Just want to say thanks for inviting me to participate. It's been a lot of fun. At this point, just want to say thanks for inviting me to participate. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting having a panel. We've got a pretty diverse group here, from someone who can educate us on how to do better, but also, work as a team to improve our data. Then you got information from manufacturers and from resellers, like from distribution. That's a pretty good group. And I mean, if you think about, this panel, hopefully we've explained it well enough here, but you've kind of got all four steps here of what it takes to use aces and pies. And this, you're getting a hard nod and hard yes that this is a big deal and this will benefit your company and ours, as we all work together to make this better. If it was something that we didn't have the passion for, we wouldn't have this webinar and we wouldn't have such great people here explaining like, hey, this is a big deal, and luckily we're in a place where this has become more standardized and easier to use. And, having that kind of invitation to come ask for help to improve your data, to make it better, this is a good place to be. So hopefully, we got some information out here to you, the participants that are in, and for the people that are kind of watching, that helps make you that decision a little bit easier. So just one more comment here. I see Alan's been pretty active here. How the documentation, maybe this is a good access here is what are some best practices if you're, kind of kick off here as best practices for your data. Seems like, the big thing here is take the first step and then be diligent about, the upkeep when you're asked about it, from your people that are accessing your data is, upkeep and make that first step. Is there anything else, Joe or Gigi, that you would recommend for best practices?
Well, Joe, do you want to talk? You haven't talked at all.
I would just say, for me, I mean, AutoCare does a pretty good job of setting what those best practices are, but I shop the product online. So whatever data I'm working on, I will go shop it through Google on multiple different sites, and I'll gather my own consensus of how the data is being put out there and how it's being used. Regardless of how I'm building it in my system, I like to go see how resellers are putting it on their website at the end game, and then I'll make my decisions off of that. So you want a consistent experience across your part types. Every reseller is going to do it a little bit different. So I would start there. I would just search your product, see how people are buying it, how it's being put out there to shop, and then get an idea of how you want to build your data with that.
Right. And I see Alan's kind of leaning in of like, it's kind of confusing because there's so many options on in the aces and pies data of what you can include about your products. You know, what's kind of that standard of what do most people do that makes a big difference. And obviously, you want to have your vehicle coverage for one, for your applications. You need to know what the year, make, model, and engine coverage is. That's pretty much industry wide. You can see that pretty much every website kind of filters the data for anybody that's interested by doing that. you know but then as far as your parts, you know what your product has, as far as what does it do and what features it has. I think really, Alan, to answer that specific question for you is, I think a good conversation with the SEMA data here is going to help you a lot to kind of explain what your product is and, get a feel for it, have a few photos of the product. These kind of things are going to be kind of the standard pieces, but kind of digging in more, what helps you sell your product is, you're going to know that better than anybody else. What makes your product special, what makes it different. And if you think about it, what kind of information do you need to share that Mike can tell his customers that are going to convince them that they want to buy it and keep it? That's a really, the best point to make there. But, to your point, there are tons of different information slots that you can fill in about your products. You can jump in there and kind of focus on the key critical ones and then go back and finish in more details as you go. Totally depends on where you're at with your data as you step in, whether you have, new and you don't have a lot of data, or if you have a lot of data and you just want to kind of finesse it to something that sells better, that's where you're going to need to, have some conversations about what it is.
There are some articles that we have on the semadata.org website under resources that can help you with what type of image you should be taking or how many images you should be taking. Also, how to develop product title descriptions for data as well. Within the tools that we have within Parts Hub, each field actually has a hint, an example of what information you can include in there. To Joe's point and actually John's point too, where each website's a little bit different. I think that's what everyone needs to kind of consider is, it's one thing where you want to classify your own product and, and mold it out however you want. But when you combine that in with other brands of similar part types, it's up to the reseller at that point, a retailer, to homogenize that information so that the user experience for someone trying to buy a part won't get confused. So providing as much information as possible actually gives the retailer the most flexibility in terms of how they can display your products, right? And merchandise your product for you. So we get asked this a lot. Actually, we got asked this in our last, and just so you know, every month at the last Friday of every month, we hold an Ask the Experts session where Joe introduces a topic that we'll be discussing for that month, but it's also open Q&A sessions with the entire SEMA data team. So you can ask us everything from what goes into your data or how it goes out. So look for that. If you aren't added already to our distribution list, please reach out to me or Joe and get added so that you can get those invites to join the Ask the Expert sessions. But we get asked this a lot. What do I need to concentrate on? And honestly, you need to definitely fitment if that's a key criteria for your product. But digital asset, your images, your installation sheets, your worksheets, whatever it be, your product description, product title, in-depth features and benefits. Don't forget the benefits part of your feature, and product attributes. Describe your product in its specifics. So that's why I love the engineers part, because that's where all the specifics come from.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. The more information, the better. You can always filter out, can't necessarily add. So, Mike, I see there's a question here kind of related for you. I don't know if you saw it or not, but asking about specifically, if you're doing data updates, do you prefer a major update across a full product line, or do you prefer like smaller kind of incremental improvements over time?
I prefer small incremental improvements over time. If there's a single data point that's wrong, it needs to be, in my opinion, corrected as soon as possible. And when I talked earlier about one of the challenges is that maintenance cadence is, if you consider that you have a reseller who has your product listed on their website, if there's a data problem with that data and that damages that listing, if it takes you 2 weeks to correct it, which sounds fast if you're a manufacturer perhaps, but it sounds very slow if you're a reseller, because you're faced with, do I go off the pies train and do I have some mechanism for updating that data myself? And then how do I recouple with that? Or do I delist that product, or do I live with a bad listing until the data comes in? So I would say that, like, we perform daily updates for the data that we manage, and we do it every day. We have a robust feedback system with our dealer base because we want that dialogue. And our expectation is if we get feedback that an image, for example, is wrong, we try to correct that within 2 business days. That's the standard that we try to set for ourselves. That may not be realistic for a manufacturer to get feedback, make a change, then go through SEMA and have it delivered. But I think as a manufacturer to be aware that when there's a deficit out there, that's damaging those listings in a way that could be significant depending on what the data problem is. So it may not seem like a big deal to you, and you say, well, we're only going to do those once a month. I disagree with that. I think the resellers want that as quickly as they can get it in there. SEMA delivers nice delta updates, so you're only updating what's changing. So that would be my advice: is if you can do it every day, if there's anything to update, should be updated as soon as possible would be my recommendation. But I also realize that that's challenging from a lot of standpoints.
Right. Yeah, and smaller pieces of smaller information to fix takes a lot less time. So, maybe on your case, you're probably dealing with thousands of SKUs, so that can probably add up pretty quick. But, for a manufacturer is, if you see an error, take that serious and just jump on it, do it quick and get it out. If you think about it, if there was a price discrepancy, error that was out there that was, 50% of what it should be selling for, you probably jump on that one pretty quick to make sure it's not out there long. So, you can treat all this information. If there's an error that prevents somebody from selling your product or sharing information about it, it's all very important and should be, done pretty quickly. And, it's got to go through multiple hands. So once I fix the data, it still has to go through other people to get out there to get fixed. So give them time as well. So the quicker you respond, the quicker it's going to make it live. So, well, I know that we've kind of run over a minute. I do want to take a minute here and give James the floor to kind of give you some more information. If you've hung on this long, I think you'd be interested to see what he's got to say here about Northwood. And let's jump into that if you want to, James.
Well, I applaud everybody who's been on this webinar for your investment of time and resources into this Aces and Pies journey. One way that we can support that journey is not just in our undergrad classes. We're the only university in North America that has an automotive aftermarket bachelor's degree, and we teach category management. We include Aces and Pies in that for our undergrads so that there are more career-ready employees coming into the industry. But we also do professional development around Aces and Pies. We want to support those who are supporting cataloging, e-commerce, and the data standards. So as a participant that has gone through this webinar, you are going to get 0.1 continuing education units for this content. So again, we're grateful for the partnership with SEMA to be able to offer these CEUs to you. Now you're going to ask, what would I do with 0.1 CEUs? It's a great question. You add those up over time as you go through more Aces and Pies training, you add this up, and we have a list of requirements along with CEUs where you can earn an industry certification in the Aces and Pies standards. And that it's called the Aftermarket Catalog Professional Designation, ACP for short. And you can put ACP after your name to designate that you have invested in yourself, your organization, and the standards to be a lifelong continuous learner, that you've demonstrated your proficiency, your expertise in this area, and that you are able to help your organization and the aftermarket accelerate down this digital journey and e-commerce. We want to help support that journey. We want to elevate this. We want to elevate those who are in these careers by offering this certification program. The question often is, well, whose responsibility is Aces and Pies? Well, let's just give it to this person over here, and now they're our data person. Well, that's not really the way that it ought to work. The entire organization has a stake in doing this well. It's part of your strategy. It's part of your execution. Engineering has a stake in this to provide the detailed information that your customer wants. Marketing has a stake in it to format that so that it is visually appealing and the copy is good. Sales is going to want to have a stake because it's going to increase your sales. Every department has a stake in this. And so we want to help elevate that by providing continuing education, providing additional training. So again, congratulations, you've earned 0.1 CEUs. SEMA is going to give you a link where you can apply for these CEUs. We will create a transcript for you. We can send that transcript out showing your continuous learning journey. And as you gain more and more CEUs, hopefully you pursue that ACP designation. And I'd be happy to provide more information on exactly what's required to earn that. But again, we're here to support you along that journey, and we hope to see all of you get that ACP at some point in your career.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, James. That's a hell of an offer. It's really cool. And especially, to know that there's a path for gaining an education here that pertains to ACEs and PIs and helping people, share the data about their products out in the world. So that's really, really exciting. Looks like our time's up here. We're going to wrap up. I appreciate all the information that you guys shared and asked questions there in our webinar chat. I do want to cover basically conference details that we have going on as a wrap up here. We have conferences here on January 27th through Thursday the 29th. That's for our 26th conference. That's going to be in Anaheim, the Media Trade Conference. If you want to register for that, that's the mediatradeconference.com. The open registration for manufacturers will be done through October 1st. It's $950 for your company, plus obviously the cost of your room. You must be an MPMC, TORA, or PRI member by January if you'd like to attend. So welcome any of you. If you're interested in the Media Trade Conference, you can find more information on mediatradeconference.com. And feel free to reach out to myself or Brian or Marcy if you have any questions. If you need something, don't hesitate to reach out. There's contact information here for all of the volunteers on the council, including myself. So thank you very much and appreciate your participation. If you'd like to become an MPMC member, look at SEMA.org/MPMC. And if you have questions or anything, please direct those towards our council director, Marcy Yanis. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all your efforts on the panel. Made this a great discussion. I think we covered a lot today. So hopefully we help some people kind of, make the best step forward for their data and their company. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
John.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.